As someone who grew up in the early 2000s, there was always two things that I really enjoyed doing: watching cartoons and playing video games. During this time frame, which is often considered the golden era of Nickelodeon, with shows like SpongeBob, Danny Phantom, Jimmy Neutron, Invader Zim, and My Life as a Teenage Robot still being fondly remembered by so many to this day. Not to mention, this was an era where Nickelodeon video games were at their peak quality, with SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, the SpongeBob movie game, Jimmy Neutron Attack of the Twonkies, the Fairly OddParents Shadow Showdown, and the Tak trilogy being the most noteworthy examples of Nickelodeon games done right. I just can't really say the same for anything that released in the late 2000s, all the way up to before the release of Rehydrated, which wasn't just a faithful remake of the original Battle for Bikini Bottom, but it marked the return for quality Nickelodeon games, with the sequel, The Cosmic Shake, coming soon. And while everyone was distracted by Sora finally coming to Smash Bros., another competitor to Smash released on the very same day, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. And I gotta tell ya, the hype surrounding this game's release has been absolutely insane since it was announced back in July. Not just because it's a Smash clone with Nickelodeon characters, or the memes that were generated from the reveal, but it's because the team behind the project, Ludosity, the very same people responsible for another popular Smash clone on Steam, Slap City. And when the developers started releasing these gameplay breakdowns a month before the game's release, it became apparently obvious that this game was not just another cheap Smash clone like Cartoon Network attempted 10 years ago. What a weird time that was. But before I get into the actual review, I just want to give a huge shout out to the amazing folks over at GameMill Entertainment for sending me a review copy for the PS4 version of the game, and if you're watching this, thank you so much, I really appreciate it. Now, if it wasn't already obvious, this review will only be focusing on the PS4 version of the game, and since the footage was captured using the PS4 Slim's built-in capture feature, it's only going to be displayed in 720p at 30 frames per second, so just keep in mind that the game looks and runs much better than what I'm currently showing. And as for the game's online features, as well as the game's use of rollback netcoding for a smoother gameplay experience, I unfortunately could not test those features out for the sake of this video. But from what I've seen of the online mode from the Switch version, it looks pretty dang smooth and responsive, although I did hear that there will be some laggy matches that come up from time to time, but the input response would always be consistent as if you were playing a local offline match, which is something that I was actually able to do, and oh boy, playing a multiplayer game like this was a very different experience for me, cause normally, I'm used to the racing or even the co-op type of multiplayer games, never a Smash-styled fighting game. Yes, I did play a bit of Smash back in the day, but that was way back when the GameCube was still a thing, and I haven't touched the series since. So playing Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl for the first time... Yep, that went pretty much like I expected. Now, just like any video game in existence, whether it be Sonic the Hedgehog or Crash Bandicoot, practice makes perfect. And after playing the game for 3 days, and only practicing with the SpongeBob characters, Danny Phantom, Oblina, and Zim, I was seemingly able to tackle anything the game could throw at me, with the feeling that there's always room for even more improvement. And this ultimately led to me trying out other characters and get acquainted with their respective moves much faster than the others, with CatDog just being so OP as they beat each other up in some of their moves. I'm almost certain some of these moves are references to the show, like what every character's moveset, winning, and losing animations managed to do really well, while at the same time allowing each character's personalities to shine through, even without voice acting being present. Now yes, this is something that people do complain about with the game, but if I'm being completely honest here, during my time with the game, I've become so laser focused on what I was doing in each and every stage, that voice acting didn't become much of a critical factor for me. Would I still like to see voice acting in the game? Absolutely. That'd be a nice cherry on top of the overall package. Thankfully, the team over at Ludosity may consider adding voice acting into the game at a later point, as they continue to build upon the Nick All-Star Brawl franchise. But in the meantime, here's an idea of what voice acting in the game could be like.
Bubble Power! Ow!
Player 2 is defeated.
Surrender, inferior being!
Now, if you've made it this far into the video, you're probably wondering how the gameplay feels and why it's taking me so long to even get to the most crucial aspect of the game. Look, I gotta keep you guys in suspense to some extent, but if you're expecting me to make a direct comparison to how this game feels with Smash Bros., that is unfortunately something I cannot do, because like I said earlier, I have not touched any Smash games since the GameCube. Don't ask me why, but I think Nintendo's seemingly non-existent price decreases could be one of the reasons. So I'll just have to go with Plan B and go on record to say that this game plays so smoothly and every move just feels so good to pull off right when you want it to, but if you happen to miss your target, get sent airborne, or run a risk of falling too far off a stage, there's almost always a way to recover and get back into the action, usually in the form of up specials or air dashes. There's even a wave dashing mechanic that the developers managed to include from Smash Bros. And while it's easy to trigger and use, I personally had a hard time executing it properly. But since every single character plays differently from each other, this allows for players of different skill levels to pick up certain characters easier than others, with characters like SpongeBob, Sandy, and Oblina being the easiest to learn, whereas characters like Zim, Danny Phantom, and Patrick are much more difficult to start out with. But like I said earlier, once you get enough practice, you can pretty much start playing as any character, no problem. Heck, there's even a dedicated training mode if you wish to get more practice. Me personally, I never used it, as all of my practice strictly came from playing against a local opponent who often thought it was funny to pit me, a relatively unexperienced player starting out, up against them and two other CPUs on their team coming at me all at once, or by simply playing through the game's arcade mode on the hardest possible difficulty. And you have no idea what it was like just playing as Zim and going up against Sandy on hard mode, as it took me nearly 2 hours just to finish the entirety of Zim's arcade mode. Most of that was just spent on Sandy alone. My gosh. And since I brought up Sandy, she is such an overpowered character. Like, if you get caught by just her lasso move, you're pretty much done for the rest of the fight. And I guess that's why CatDog just kinda gave up on their last life in Sandy's portion of the arcade mode. I'd assume that this was a glitch of some kind, but outside of this, I only noticed one other glitch, and that was when Ren and Stimpy got stuck in SpongeBob's arcade mode and nothing would affect them. At least until I went down there, grabbed them, and threw them off the stage. Talk about an easy win. But speaking of the arcade mode, it's relatively straightforward. You play through a series of one-on-one fights against a CPU, and you just keep doing that until you get to the very end with a respective character, and you unlock some character exclusive rewards in the extras menu, which includes brand new character renders for the characters you play as, and even some for the background characters. Some environmental shots with the characters interacting with their respective levels, character icons for when you play online, which I cannot use, and a new piece of music for the jukebox, where you can listen to the various tracks inspired by their respective Nicktoons stages. And my gosh, I did not expect the game's soundtrack to be this good. Almost every track in the game was an absolute jam. From the techno vibe of TMNT's Technodrome, to Invader Zim's stage transitioning between 3 different dark, simple, and battle tones, and it all actually fits the character. Heck, even the All Real Monsters theme song got some sort of remix for Oblina's level. That's actually pretty cool. And if you really want to, you can even play the SpongeBob stages with the soundtrack of Battle for Bikini Bottom. All you need is a USB drive with the respective tracks on it, plug it into your PS4, and boom, custom tracks. And surprisingly, these fit pretty well. In terms of the actual stages, each one is tied to a specific character. SpongeBob with Jellyfish Fields, Oblina with the Junkyard, Invader Zim with the Urkin Armada Invasion, etc. And they're all actually pretty good stages, with every stage varying from being really simple, like Korra's stage, to being a bit more complex with some hazards thrown into the mix, like Glove World, with its combination of rotating platforms and roller coaster obstacles, basically requiring you to know these levels inside and out. Although Ren and Stimpy's stage is kinda broken, simply because of how easy it is to win almost any match in this stage, not to mention almost every single platform syncs, so it does manage to separate itself from the other stages in this regard. It's just not my favorite stage to play. Going back to the arcade mode real quick, at the start of each match, we're greeted to the characters saying a couple of one-liners before going at each other. But what you probably did not even notice is that most, if not all of them, are direct quotes their respective characters have said from their respective shows. And while this is a simple way of bringing back some good memories, while attempting to have some interaction between characters, some of them do repeat for no reason at all. A couple times in a row, actually. Oblina, you just said the exact same thing in the last fight. What exactly did they do for you to say, "I told you so," twice? Okay, well, actually multiple times in a row, because you apparently like saying it. Some of them don't really correlate to what the other character just said. Heck, even SpongeBob was accidentally given a Plankton quote.
Remember, ravioli, ravioli, give me the formuoli.
I don't know if that was an accident, but you know, it works I guess. Okay, we got one last thing to talk about before wrapping up this video, and that is the battle modes. There are 3 modes in total: stock, timed, and sports. All of these modes is where the local multiplayer takes place, and it also happens to be the only place where Patrick versus Patrick versus Patrick versus Patrick can exist. Move over, Knuckles and Knuckles and Knuckles, there's a new competitor in town. Every battle mode features different rules you can adjust on a match-by-match basis, including stock numbers, time limit, teams, critical KOs, which will immediately cause a player to lose without being knocked off a platform or out of the stage when hit with a strong enough attack after taking so much damage. And of course, friendly fire, if you so wish to accidentally deal damage to your fellow teammates. Don't know why the game tells me each character is part of 2 different teams though. In stock mode, your goal is to knock all other players off or out of the stage and completely eliminate their stocks, which are also known as lives for anyone that prefers to use that term. In time mode, it's pretty much the same process as stock mode, except your goal is to knock the other players off or out of the stage as much as possible within the time limit. And while this is slightly different in concept, there's no real way of telling how many times a player has lost until you arrive at the results screen, and that kinda sucks because you have absolutely no clue if you're in the lead or if you're falling behind. And then there's sports mode. Here you have an assortment of balls to play with. Each one has their own set of rules, but they all require delivery to the goal to score points. Whoever has the most points or reaches the goal within the time limit wins. But in my personal opinion, some of these just aren't very fun, because Plankton Ball requires the ball to be knocked into their respective goals. The problem is, the goals are raised so high up off the ground that me, another player, and the computers on our respective teams had a ridiculously hard time even getting this ball in there. Thankfully, soccer was a bit more enjoyable, even though it was still hard to get the ball into the goals. But at least it was far more manageable than Plankton Ball, due to the ball being able to be moved by any means necessary. Yarn Ball is... I don't know. It wasn't boring, it just didn't feel very good to play. But football, okay, now this one was easily my favorite out of a bunch, as basically the only way you can even move the ball is by picking it up, double jump is off limits while carrying the ball, and throw it into the goal, just like real football. And also just like real football, everyone wants it. So if you're playing with someone locally, and you both have a computer-controlled partner, some chaotic fun is sure to be unleashed. But with all that said, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl is a fantastic game, and as my first time playing a Smash-styled game in what seems like forever, it definitely gets the job done at feeling like a proper competitor to Smash Bros. That just so happens to be available on every single console platform and PC, so a lot more people are going to be able to experience this game for that reason. Now, the game isn't perfect, as there are a few things that can be fixed up here and there to really help make the experience feel even more polished than it is now. And with the team listening to fan feedback, on top of continuing to support the game post-release, with DLC characters and updates, the future is definitely looking bright for this game. And before I go, yes, I'm fully aware of the recent datamine leaks for the game, but just know that I will be making a video for when new characters are announced for the game, so be sure to stay tuned for all of that when it happens. But anyways guys, that's all I've really got for this video. If you stuck around for the whole thing, thank you so much. It really means a lot. And if you've gotten the opportunity to play this game, or you're planning on getting it, be sure to leave everything down in the comments section below, and also be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell for more Nickelodeon and All-Star Brawl content as it happens. And once again, thank you guys so much for the support and for always tuning in. I've been Blueknight, and I'll see you guys back here next time.
What?